Marshall here. Welcome back to the Realignment. Hey everyone, welcome back to the show. Today I am joined by Curt Mills. Curt is the executive director of the American Conservative. And we're here to talk all things 2024 election. We discuss why he is surprisingly bullish on Biden's chances for re-election, despite all the obvious narratives going against that. We also discuss the state of the Republican Party and the conservative movement. I should also note that we recorded this conversation before the assassination attempt on President Trump this past Saturday, but Curt and I chatted offline, and he still stands by all of the comments he made on today's episode. Also note that I had promised to do a great free and open Ask Me Anything and discussion episode for folks answering their questions of the 2024 election. I decided to hit pause on that because I recorded it literally right before the assassination attempt on President Trump. So I'd rather just see what happens at the Republican National Convention this week when it comes to everything from Trump's agenda to the vice presidential pick, and then come back with Sagar to respond to those questions a little later towards the end of the month. So hope everyone can bear with me on that. Huge thank you to the Foundation for American Innovation for supporting work of this podcast. Hope you all enjoy the conversation. Curt Mills, welcome to the Realignment.
Thank you for having me.
So let's do the following. We're recording this Friday afternoon Eastern. This is going to come out on a Tuesday. So there's entirely a world where everything changes over the weekend. But I think for pure intellectual accountability's sake, if anything changes over the weekend and our takes are incorrect, people could still listen and judge where our thinking wasn't particularly helpful. Last night, Joe Biden did his big NATO presser, which the campaign, the media, everyone in between really framed as this huge make or break opportunity for him. What is your review of the presser and the implications moving forward?
Yeah, I mean, I think he did quite well. Look, I don't know how this episode is going to be couched, but I guess I've just become the sort of like right-wing defense of Biden person, and so like that's fine. Like it occurs to me. Okay, let's start with this.
Wait, can you clarify? When you say right-wing defense of Biden, do you mean Biden as the candidate or Biden at a policy level? Because there's like, for example, Julius Krein and American Affairs have like navigated this like kind of difficulty. Like, so what do you mean by defense of Biden?
Yeah, most of my appreciation is about his political talent, which I think is misunderstood and underrated, not only by Republicans, but by the mainstream media. There are like positive things I could say about the Biden administration. I think the Afghanistan withdrawal decision was heroic, and that was like the president who appeared in the White House treaty room in April of 2021 and defended it, and then again defended it, you know, at the absolute nadir of the withdrawal's competence in August 2021 is still the right decision. Was a brave man and a good president. That guy has unfortunately not been the most present in this administration, which obviously gets to questions of his fitness. I'm not a fan of what it effectively has been his foreign policy legacy since then, which is the war in Ukraine, which in my view is the most reckless foreign policy decision since the war in Iraq. And if anyone knows anything about our magazine, we're not fans. So yes, most of my appraisal is about his competence and my enjoyment of him as a political persona and player.
Okay, so that's great. I like the way you set this up. What are Democrats who are in the process of bedwetting themselves getting wrong about Biden? Then we'll do the MSM, and then we'll do Republicans.
Sure. Okay. So this occurred to me last night. I was talking on the phone after the press conference with some people, and you know, we are in a situation now where it seems like every single generation is becoming more introverted, more online, and less confident, right? So I'm 33, I'm millennials. It seems like the 23-year-olds are more introverted, less confident, and more online than I am. And so, and then it also occurs to me on the very top of our society, we have not online, highly confident, like not anxious, octogenarian oligarchs, right? And so it's this really weird situation in which Biden is this terrible candidate for headline culture, right? Like he literally called Zelensky heading into this thing Putin. He called Donald Trump the vice president. That is probably going to be like a lot of what people see. And then additionally, I would say people who are high information and in media, I don't want to use like mainstream media, just in media, are reading headlines all day, and because it's the only way to, it's just happening too fast. Like they're also consuming media in that way. If you actually watched his press conference, right? Like I think there's a couple of things that need to be addressed. First of all, like, is the president of the United States fine? Is he actually senile? Like, what does that term mean? Does he not know his name? Does he not know his wife's name? Does he not know who the Secretary of State is? Does he not know what year he was elected to the Senate? Does he not, in truth, know who Zelensky is? I don't know how you could watch that press conference or watch any of the press conferences of the last, say, 6 years or 5 years since he's been running for president since the spring of 19, and like conclude that honestly, like, and I mean that, like, with all due respect to like a lot of people who are my friends who you know, in center right media, who just like literally say the guy's senile, literally say he's a vegetable. I just think it's nonsense. I just think it's like this is like trash journalism. It's just not true. If you watch him, he is there. He's a person. Like obviously he's there and he's the person. Or else like the Democrats would have rolled him yesterday, right? Like he would not be the president today if he didn't have agency. He has agency. Should the president be 81? Like no. But
some normative statement,
right? Yeah, but like, do I think that the most offensive part of inequality of power in American society based on age is Biden? Like, not even close, right? Like, it's like if the entire conversation about age and power in the United States was focused on just removing Biden so we can get Kamala Harris or something, like, that just strikes me as a huge waste of time and, like, you know, completely missing the forest for one tree. And then, like, there's the question of, you know, how can Biden proceed, you know, within the maelstrom of Democratic politics and elite financing, what is occurring right now. And so in terms of your actual question, sorry for the long-winded answer, but
no, it's a good answer though.
Useful to set it up. I think he delivered a rock solid performance for his interests, in which he was himself. If you want my view on like what goes on with the dude, I do kind of believe most of the lines trotted out by the administration, which makes me sound like a simp, but like, I do think he had a cold at the debate. I do think, you know, it's hard to travel internationally, even in, you know, 5-star hotels. He seemed tired. And I do think he has this like stutter problem, which he is less and less on top of, in his 80s, right? Like, I mean, anybody who has like something, you know, like weird stuff about themselves, like they have probably found like they are more comfortable and on top of that stuff in their, you know, late 20s, 30s, and 40s than they were in their teens or their childhood. And they, you know, it's a pretty common story to hear, you know, people less effective at coping with their own disabilities as they get older. And I think you're seeing that. And then additionally, like, I think you're seeing like human nervousness on him, which is like people are telling him he is mentally disabled all day. Like, as much as he has had, you know, all of the reps of a 50-year career, you know, I think you are seeing a little bit of nervousness when he trails off or hesitates. So in essence, I think he delivered a fine performance. He showed that he was there. You know, we can get into the questions like, should the president of the United States do press conferences once a week? Like, maybe, yeah. Like, I'm open to all of these things. I'm not just like defending the Biden administration not having a formal cabinet meeting since October of 2023. But as to the question of, is he there? Is he the president? And like, is this the most offensive story ever that he's the president? Yes and no. And as to the question is, does he have a path forward? Absolutely.
And what I'll say too here is, in the wake of the disastrous debate performance, all of my right-wing friends, and this goes to what you're really articulating here, were texting me, oh man, 25th Amendment. Oh man, even if he doesn't run again, he's going to have to resign. This man can't be president. I think he certainly answered. Not that he was even trying to answer, because that was such a like right, but that wasn't even the conversation on the center left. Joe Biden, are you going to resign the presidency tomorrow? But I think from a pure, can this person hold this job through January 2025, I think resoundingly answered that question. The actual issue, though, and I'd love to hear your take on this, because I saw some of your tweets, despite us talking about how people could be too online, obviously. To what degree has the utter failure of him to consolidate the Democratic Party in its unwieldy coalition and interest groups and jumpy politicians. Talk about the past 2 weeks, because that has been the actual disaster to me. That is where I actually lost faith in him as an actual candidate. The inability just to come in on, I mean, there's some really good Washington Post reporting on this. Like, some of the reporting indicated, you know, how people were talking about how, wow, like Joe Biden didn't call the donors, and oh, wow, like they totally wasted all this time during the week of July 4th. Apparently that was because his team did not make the assessment of how badly he came off during the actual debate. So those are the things where I'm sort of like, oh man, like you are not up to this if you cannot manage the political fallout of that disaster. How do you think about that dynamic?
So just not to make, I know this is an interview, but are you still pretty much he's going to go, or have you changed your opinion since the performance or whatever the conference?
I'm a useless prognosticator. I'll give my opinion, but I'm useless on this because in the morning, I'm like, it's over. Joe Biden's going to stay. Things then happen during because think about it this way, like you wake up, here's what happens. Biden will have a terrible day, unendorsements, op-eds. You literally wake up to like 5 different New York Times op-eds a day, like dunking on him. And throughout the day, it gets worse and worse and worse. They don't really have a strong rebuttal to any of these points, but he survives. So you wake up the next morning thinking, okay, if he survived that day, how's he not going to survive that next day? So I'm just stuck in this cycle. So last night I was talking to highly placed friends asking for like a view into the Democratic Party. I was like, oh yeah, like Joe Biden's totally done. This morning I'm like, no, he survived. So that's kind of like right now, because we're recording this at 12:18 Central, Joe Biden survives.
Yeah, I mean, so like, I feel like we traded messages like just getting ready for the show, and like I said, like, I don't know, whatever, 24 hours ago before the press conference, like I still think he makes it, and you were just like, there's no way. And
I know,
like,
hold me accountable. I was like, Curt, yeah, there's no way.
Yeah, and like I understood, like, and because you were not the only person I was saying this to, like the response on the other end of the line is like, you know, you thought you were talking to an insane person, like just like a clinically insane person that like I could see this. And like now, like he does one press conference, and like all of a sudden, like the balance of power is shifting to the asylum, right? Where he makes it. I mean, this just, I will answer your question, but I do think this just strikes me as just so redolent of a couple of news cycles in my, 10-year career, which is I would lay them. Trump as serious and could win and as real politician. News cycle of 2015, 2016. Mm-hmm. Trump as agent and pawn and actual asset of the Kremlin of say 2017 to 2019. The dawn of COVID and the response to COVID. And you can rope in the cultural stuff, but let's just focus on the virus and the ensuing reaction to that. And then probably my least favorite, because this is the one where I will say that my record is patchiest. The invasion of Ukraine in 2022. So this, I think we have had since, I don't know, like ubiquitous smartphone adoption, say 10 years ago, like we have had an event happens. Elite tastemakers are absolutely adamant with a mixture of like professional self-defense and moral seriousness that this is the right way. This is the serious take. This is anybody who doesn't have this opinion is a scoundrel and a rube. And like the direct opposite happens, right? Like Trump was a serious candidate for president, remains a serious candidate for president 10 years later. Trump actually wasn't a provable asset of Russia. Like it's the most investigated story ever. And like Trump can barely pay off a porn star without it getting him convicted. Like the idea that he is, working for Putin surreptitiously just strikes me as like a joke. COVID, any skepticism to all of a sudden changing the entire way we do our entire lives, especially as government officials. If you replay mid-March of 2020, the government officials were not prepared to lock down. All of a sudden, they flipped on a dime within a week. This strikes me as very similar. We're like, an event happens, right? If Biden doesn't do this debate, like we're not doing this. Like remember, like rewind. Like the Democratic talking points were how illegitimate is it to be on the stage with the Hitler person, right? Biden should pass. Biden should not do it. Biden should not platform Trump. If Biden just does the lazy Democratic orthodoxy thing, there is no crisis this summer, none. So he has one event and a crisis, and the elite tastemakers make a snap judgment, and then we all are existing within that universe. And then, I would say similar stuff to Russia, Ukraine, which is you have Russia underperforming clearly, but mildly in 2022. And then all of a sudden it is like Putin is like has stage 9 cancer. Putin is going to be dethroned. Autocratic governments will never, ever do anything that rivals the United States ever again. Fukuyama is back. Put him on the throne of skulls of all haters. Pretend like the last 20 years of his opinions it doesn't matter, right? Like he's Karl Marx incarnate, but more successful. Like that's just all silly. Like go back and like read what Fukuyama was writing in the spring of 2022. Like none of it came true, none of it. And so like it's the same thing where like a snap event happens. The people with power and influence and reach, celebrity reach, to make a point, set the agenda for what is, quote, the right and serious and credible response to something, and it's totally wrong.
So I'd like to understand then, because I really like your theory about the gerontocracy having a admirable trait, which could go too far, the confidence. I do like your reframing of Joe Biden because it's actually, because the kind of like funny take here is, I'm sure you saw the news about how during Joe Biden's debate, you had Joe Biden campaign staffers like literally catatonically on the floor watching it. I don't say I find that particularly compelling from let me put it this way. Like my biggest frustration when this happened during my episode with Eric Weinstein, when Sagar was still doing the interviews, where Eric was started saying like Joe Biden is just so old and we need to transition.
Weinstein was saying that.
Yeah, Joe Biden's just so old. He basically went down like the litany of like IDW dunks against Joe Biden, which were actually very inaccurate. Said he was woke, all these different things. And I said, Eric, on every single metric which you identified here, younger Democrats would be way, 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 way worse, less confident, way more woke, way less effective. So I think it's just like important that we recognize that now that the gerontocracy is evil take is there, that we don't just sort of freebase it ineffectively and just leave open the very serious vulnerabilities. I'll say this. I mean this really seriously. I have very little confidence in the rising millennial center left, like at all. I think this is a problem which hasn't become clear because the generational transition hasn't happened. But this is a huge problem, which the millennial center right to conservative to far right has its own very, very, very obvious problems. But this isn't one of their categorical problems at a pure confidence leadership like action level. Like, what do you think about that?
Yeah. So do we answer like
or just wherever you want to take it? This is just like we're kind of, this isn't, let me put it this way. This is less of an interview episode and more like we're commentators who are discussing something. So go wherever you want to go.
Okay. Yeah. So I like Eric as a person. As far as I've ever gotten to know him, I think he's like an elegant, smart thinker. I just think all the anti-Biden like vegetable stuff is just blowhard crap. Like I just like. If you're so smart, why aren't you the president like Joe Biden? Like it's basically like my complete rejoinder to all of his critics. And so like there's just a complete refusal. I got an email this morning, like talking about some, old friend, and the guy is just talking about how Biden graduated at the bottomless class of securities law. And like, why is it that the MSNBC personalities, like, even like talk to him, like, Maddow she was a Rhodes Scholar, and Chris Hayes went to Brown. I'm like, this is just like the dumbest valence ever, right? Like, what do we, what is that, the sports reference? Why do we play? We play to win the game. Like Joe Biden is very good at winning the game. He has a pretty strong record. And like the idea that is like not what we should be talking about here is silly. And the idea that there are different forms of human intelligence and human cunning and human charisma, that he's not doing it the right way is just like how people have gotten it wrong. And this, like, look, Biden can wake up tomorrow and conclude, my critics are right. I am dumb and I should resign suddenly after trying to fight for 2 weeks. And my line of analysis will look in essence wrong. But I think we are reaching the absolute zenith of what has been occurring for at least since his current incarnation since 2019, but for like a very long time, which is nobody took this guy seriously, and it has been just wrong. Like the Trump campaign didn't take him seriously in 2020. They didn't think he'd win the primary. Remember, the serious people. Warren is going to win. Buttigieg is going to win. Sanders is going to become the president. Like, no, the high name recognition, like vice president, who people kind of like, who voters, I should say, kind of like, who has
found the ideological center of the Democratic Party, which is a huge, he's not, Julian. I need to say this because I've been very annoyed about this. Everyone and their cousin is gassing up Julian Castro because he questioned Biden's age during the 2019 debates. It's like, you know what else Julian Castro said during the 2019 debates? He said that the Democrats should basically embrace a platform of unlimited immigration. How well has that take aged? There really has to be a reckoning. And this just goes to my generational issue of the Democratic Party. I think Julian Castro is a clown, and it's just very unfortunate that he's getting gassed up in the wake of like this 2024 debate issue.
Well, I mean, I think I've done it a few times on Twitter. I don't know if anybody gets this reference because I'm just terminally millennial, but like it really is like that Chappelle stand up where like he talks about how he's watching MTV on 9/11 and like MTV brings on Ja Rule to commentate on the 9/11 attacks. And it's like, who cares what Ja Rule thinks at a time like this? It's like, who cares about Julian Castro, who got destroyed by Biden? Like they're bringing on like, the sports equivalent is like they're bringing on like the D League, right? From Democrat people. Like I'm sure Castro has impressive things about him. I think I forget which Castro brother was the mayor.
It was Julian.
Yeah. Like I'm sure like he's not an idiot. But like in terms of commenting on Biden's capabilities and predicting of where this is going, this is bringing on like the Dick Fold of Bidenology. Like this is like bringing on Dick Fold to talk about the global financial crisis. Like it's wrong. It's like the dumbest person to bring on ever. Like they'd be better off bringing on a homeless guy from the street than half these people.
Let's talk about Republicans then. Tim Alberta literally put this literally in the Atlantic yesterday. The Trump team is planning on a landslide. What is your, I'm guessing, your critique of this perspective?
I mean, let's talk about how Hillary Clinton was going to win South Carolina in 2016. Like, the grim irony for Trump is if he does lose because, okay, let me say one thing real quickly. I have noticed what we will see, presumably, Trump's style next week at the convention. And we will see, I think he's speaking on Saturday. So perhaps he's speaking tomorrow in Western Pennsylvania. So we'll get a flavor after his hibernation. I think he had an event at Doral in Florida this week too. I don't think he said anything of substance or newsworthiness. But I have noticed a disconnect thus far between Trump's campaign people and Trump the man. So this might be old. Maybe he'll believe his own Kool-Aid by the time this episode airs, and he very well might. But the campaign people seem like they think they're going to win 45 states, and they want to run against Biden, and they think it's in the bag. Trump, in the only moment of candor that I've seen on the golf cart thing, indicated that he seemed like he still preferred to run against Harris, which I think is the right call. Like, I don't know why you would run against Biden. Like,
you're not coconut pilled.
Yeah. Well, look, I'm weird. My other cut a month ago was that Harris is underrated, which I still like. I think she was underrated a month ago. Now she's overrated. Like, people forgot like she was like a world historically unpopular vice president. She was like Dick Cheney levels without like Iraq. right? Like people did not like her 6 weeks ago. And now we're just supposed to be like, well, etch a sketch, pretend like that didn't happen. She's more popular than Biden. So, yeah, I answered the question of Alberta's journalism on the Trump campaign. Like I don't love his stuff. I'll just put that aside. So I'm a little biased. I don't think he understands the party. And I think that's not awesome. I think the sort of apostate right winger who represents the losing faction of Republican politics, commenting on Republican politics is like, we've done that. We've done the neocon editors. Like, I don't think it's that revealing. As to what the Trump campaign people are saying about their wins, like I'm not a believer. Like I just think this is going to be really close. Biden's midterm performance is still remains stunning. Right.
Well, but this is where this gets complicated.
Yeah.
Biden wasn't on the, so because here's my bear case for Biden.
Okay.
The Republican Party is fundamentally weak. His way of understanding basically everything since everything that's not Trump is like really garbage.
Yep.
And Joe Biden wasn't on the ballot in 2022. And the reason why, and obviously the whole like people are going to vote differently for Senate and the presidency thing, I think is like, I'm a little skeptical of that idea, but at least in the polling, the reason why there's a gap between Ruben Gallego and Joe Biden in Arizona, Ruben being up, Joe Biden being really down, is people just don't like Joe Biden. So the 2022 midterms example is when Joe Biden's off the ballot, but Trump is on the ballot in the sense of Dobbs, in the sense of like bad MAGA candidates. Obviously, they're going to win.
Aren't you picking it though? I mean, like, why is Biden off the ballot in 22 and Trump on the ballot? Like, it strikes me as either they're both off or both on. You got to pick a lane. You see what I'm saying?
I'm thinking.
My cut in 2022 was that Trump was not on the ballot, and this is my cut 2 years ago, and everybody made fun of me. My cut was that DeSantis was on the ballot, and that was the woke election, right? Like that was the woke COVID election, right? And DeSantis was the smart set next. Right? Like as soon as the midterm happened, like the smart people were like, DeSantis is going to win. Like this is like, and like I remember like just at Christmas 22, people were like, Trump is done, and I'm like, wow. I am buying Trump stock. I don't have a fully formed cut on this yet, but I am just like, I'm going to stash that. And then it just became clear that was the woke election. And I think the anti-woke message actually, ironically, is a winner in the popular vote for the Republicans. It's just terrible for the distribution of swing states. So like,
I'll explain that. That's interesting.
Okay. So like, I noticed that I was biased. I was living in Southern California at the time, but I noticed that like how anti-Democrat people seemed in 2022 in like red states, so like New York or California, seemed quite perceptible. Which is like, okay,
you mean in blue states,
right? In blue states, my mistake. Yeah. So thank you. Okay, rewind. So like, it's very useful because it's a reminder of a media cycle that was totally wrong that we've just flushed from our memory, right? And I don't mean to like present myself as like so above all of this and I'm right, et cetera, et cetera. I just think I have a bit more of a memory for this, and I'm a bit of a jerk about insisting like that we revisit this more than most people. I would say if we rewind 24 months, we had basically the conventional wisdom is that we were moving on from Donald Trump. We were going to get a younger Gen X, palatable, competent. He runs a real estate, center right guy in the former Ron DeSantis. The first test of this will be the midterms of 2022. We already had the test of it in 2021 with Glenn Youngkin, Well, they won in Virginia, right?
Yeah.
I'm from
and we're critically to the DeSantis case, the school board and like school wokeism issues were a huge part of the narrative. And obviously, Ron DeSantis is that on steroids in terms of Florida.
Right. And then like additionally, I think this is really critical. The COVID thing had still been going on until like March of 22, right? The mask mandate was not lifted in LA until like February or March of 2022. I think there was the national trend. So we were still in that shadow. And then I think the COVID thing was inextricably linked to BLM and to trans at a certain point, right? Like it just became like, in this house, we believe like that really was offering. All of that feels so far away now, by the way. Like I understand that these are still real issues, but they're just so not on the front burner like they were 20 months ago. Okay. Mm-hmm. So that message, as far as I could tell from my friends in the blue states, just sound like Barack Obama, right? Is that like, they were like, I could, we're moving on from Trump. I could do this, like, I don't really believe the full trans thing. I think the BLM thing got excessive. I'm tired of wearing the mask. Like, I might vote Republican in my Orange County, congressional district. And I might even look at DeSantis against Biden in 24 or, maybe, or of course, Biden is going to go because he'll go and he will be Harris, right? That was also the view. And so if you look at it, like, why do the Republicans control the House? Like Southern California and New York. Mm-hmm. They have these they have these strange urban or suburban districts in highly blue areas. Where do they not do well? Nevada, Arizona, Georgia, Florida. Okay. What is true?
With Florida, you made it a congressional level, right?
Sorry. I meant Georgia.
Yeah.
Let's just deal with let's deal with the swing states that Trump needs to win, and let's subdivide them from blue wall, okay? So Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin to Sun Belt, right? And so what is true of Nevada to a lesser extent, but particularly Arizona and Georgia in the last 3 years, right? These are positive places that have seen population growth, right? Jobs are coming there. Like the vibe is good. And so when Republicans go there and say, everything is BLM, everything is trans, everything is woke, the sky is falling, it's over, it just sounds insane, right? And I think you have seen that, even though the country's mood 3 years ago was kind of there. It just wasn't there in the swing states. Now we can parse this a little bit. Like, is Pennsylvania a failing place? I don't know. Like, every time I go to the Philly suburbs, I'm just stunned by how rich they are. Philly is obviously like a failing place, I think. Like, or it's like, I mean, everybody I know who lives there tell me it's a lunch town, which means like don't go there for dinner. That doesn't strike me as super safe. But on the other hand, it's probably not as dangerous as like say New York in the 90s, right? Like, I don't know. So hard to measure. So it strikes me as the anti-woke message is poor for the swing states, for the Republicans.
What about the economy inflation message? Because that's clearly that's what because a quick anecdote.
Inflation was worse in 22. Inflation was like actually kind of bad. Like the Biden administration got it wrong. The Fed got it wrong. It was an acute crisis. It was going up. The second derivative was going up. It wasn't Italian inflation. It wasn't Argentine inflation. It wasn't Zimbabwe inflation. It was an Iranian inflation. You get the point. But it was the worst inflation clearly in 40 years, and the government didn't seem on top of it. And Biden still won, or the Democrats still won. And it's not ideal right now. And like maybe Americans will still punish the government on it. But it doesn't seem like a super live issue to me. I mean, in terms of economic issues in this campaign, the reality is, I don't know if the United States has ever really recovered from 2008. I think the United States has become an unequal society. I think the United States has become a society in which people feel like they can't form families. But on the other hand, by all kinds of objective metrics. Like, this is a far richer country than the European Union. There's been a major divergence in economic performance in the last 20 years between American standard of living and European standard of living, if we believe numbers. I mean, so let's just say we have to believe them. The economic story here strikes me as better than in Europe or in China. The unemployment's really low, right? So it's just like, it's not clear it's this economic election in the way, like, I would not, if I were Trump and like my liberty were conceivably at stake on the result of this election, I would not feel like I should just pick, a business guy as my VP and like just assume Biden is going to fall out of the sky. Like that would not be my approach. But he's not asking me.
What is your answer in 2024 about the polls then, right? Because what anyone who's in the know is going to respond to you is say, well, Curt, we have all the polls showing the inflation thing still matters. Biden's severely underwater in the swing states. Like, what's your response to that?
I tend to believe the Senate polls.
Okay, so like basically, so do you know what's possible? This is a weird. So if Biden ends up winning, I'll just offer this take now. I think Biden is going to prove to be an unpollable president, in the sense that he's never going to be a guy who has a high approval rating for a variety of like serious narrative issues that are unfixable.
Yep.
I don't think there's any world where a president who is 81 and has the issues he has is going to get high approval ratings. And we need to just separate that from our like measurement. So you think of the Senate. So I guess why the Senate accurate, not the president?
Well, I don't know. Like my answer is I would default to the Senate being true.
Okay.
So like I am inclined to believe the Senate more than I believe the presidential. I think
it's hard to see the, Democratic senator up by like 8 to 10 in Wisconsin and also think that Joe Biden's down by like 11.
The willy-nilliness of this is insane from people. Like, go through elections in the last 24 years. People don't ticket split. This is not a thing. Like, people are like, oh yeah, no, people used to ticket split in the 80s. Like, yes, there was a very clear reason for that. It was called civil rights. Okay. So plenty of people in the South voted for their local Congressman Sam, good old boy Sam, Charlie Wilson stuff, blah, 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 blah. And we're like, Walter Mondale is a woke. They wouldn't say that, but like, Walter Mondale sucks. I like Reagan. So like, thus you had this story of conservative Southern Democrats forming the bulwark of the 50-year House run that the Democrats had, at the same time of Republican landslides in 72 and 84, and just really like hyper competitiveness, right? I mean, like Republicans were the default party of the White House from 1968 to 2008. And the Democrats were always moving towards the Republicans, right? The only times that they won were with Southern governors. Like So like it would appear the country had a very conservative mood, and but at the same time, the Democrats had this advantage in the House that I think held until 94. But also, I mean, there were elements of this that occurred in the 06 congressional takeback, right? I mean, like that was a very moderate takeback, and you saw it with the struggle that Obama had to get his agenda through. Plenty of people voted against Obamacare. They didn't get cap and trade done. It was not nearly as liberal or left or whatever you want to call it as a takeover would be today, right? So like ticket splitting in that context, and I think a lot of I think a mixture of people, two sets of people think ticket splitting is going to occur. Ultra Trumpists, okay, and like boomers. So like the boomer one's like a little bit forgivable because they remember it, but like also like all boomer things that they don't remember anything's changed since like the Volcker era. So like that's number one. And then ultra Trumpists want to like believe that Trump is going to win this going away. and maybe have an agenda against the down ballot Republicans somehow or something like that. And I just don't believe it. Like one of those polls is going to be dead wrong. And my instinct is that if Senate candidates are doing that poorly in swing states
on the R side,
that there's a
this
story.
Is like McCormick in Pennsylvania, previous podcast guest, but not doing well in the polls.
The Steele ran the pro case that what I'm saying is dumb is that basically I believe these are mostly it's a lot of incumbents, and so like the candidates haven't introduced themselves, and so once they introduce themselves, they'll improve. I just like don't believe it. So let's go through the races. Like, do we think that Carrie Lake has not introduced herself to Arizona voters?
She's over-introduced herself.
Yeah. Do we think that? I mean, I think Gallego is fairly known as well. I mean, he's a longtime congressman. His wife was the mayor of Phoenix, same last name, ex-wife, and or whatever. And then Nevada. Sam Brown ran last time. Not the largest state. McCormick ran last time. There are some more. Actually none of them. I mean, Havda, if that's how you say his name, in Wisconsin, is a kind of perennial candidate. Mike Rogers is a longtime congressman. Pretty memorable name. Bernie Moreno ran last time. And I think is a well-known businessman in the state. So maybe they're not as well-known as like Sherrod Brown in Ohio or Bob Casey in Pennsylvania, but we're running out of time for these the introduction argument, to really pass muster. So you basically have to argue that the polls are fake on the Senate side and that Trump's going to carry it. And maybe it'll happen, but I would submit, you would really have to believe to think the polling is accurate across the board, that there is a coterie of voters out there that are prepared after all of this time, after everything that has occurred. And again, by the way, I run a Trump sympathetic magazine, and we are pretty sympathetic to Trump. And
this is why, by the way, I'm glad you started off the episode by bashing NATO and the Ukraine war, because nothing is worse than when you have the Republican or the conservative who's here to tell liberals everything they want to hear is correct. Very clearly, these are not your ideological priors you're activating here.
No. We're fans. We're sympathetic to a lot of it. Not all of it, I would say. And but really speaking for myself. But this is not the Bulwark. This is not Little Spash. This is not the Examiner. This is not anything close. This is yeah. And we are further than I think American Affairs were any of those other guys. So we wade into the personality. So I say this not trying to just be an orange man bad guess. So but you would have to believe that after all of it, that Trump is on his way to getting 55% of the popular vote, that Trump is going to take back states where he has been culturally anathema, like Virginia. I can get into Virginia if you want, but not a believer.
Go to Virginia after you're done with this.
He will not win Virginia. And then meanwhile, there's a systemic polling error in the Senate. Or sorry, let's say the Senate polling is right. So you're saying that there's a voter, they're 35 years old, and they're like, you know what? I think Biden is a vegetable. I'm going to vote for Trump. I'm changing my opinion on Trump after 10 years. I like him now. After he was convicted, after January 6th. Now I'm in. I couldn't do it. I couldn't do it for the first 10 years or whatever. I couldn't do it for the first 70 years of his celebrity, right? But now I'm changing my mind. And then meanwhile, I think that Project 2025 runs the Trump campaign. And so I'm going to punish Bernie Moreno. I'm going to punish Dave McCormick. I'm going to punish Sam Brown, Mike Rogers. They're all moderates. I mean, maybe Carrie Lake is not, right? But Brown, Rogers.
Republicans largely have eliminated the like bad MAGA fit candidate problem, other than Carrie Lake.
Look, if we're being absolutely honest, it seems like Eric Hupta is kind of a hardliner in Wisconsin, and Carrie Lake is like a force of personality, right wing star in Arizona. So okay, put those to aside. Rogers is like, I believe he's a former House Intel chair or something like that. I mean, this is like, you know,
straightforward Stratoid stuff.
Yeah. I'm sure. Yeah. I think maybe he'll be interesting. Like, but I mean, on the surface, Mitch McConnell has to be licking his chops at someone like that. You know, Bernie Moreno, I think, has definitely allied himself with like Vance and the MAGA wing, but like this is like a middle class business guy. This is not like it's fine, you know, right? It's like this is not gonna. It's hard to caricature, you know. And McCormick is like, he's a Bridgewater person who like, this is not, and McCormick has explicitly broken, in my opinion, like not sagely with parts of Trump's agenda. For instance, McCormick, I think, has attacked the trade elements of Trump's agenda, which would not be my move if I were running for Senate.
That's how Trump won PA. If I get that is not the way. Ideology aside, that is not how I would run in PA.
Yeah. I don't think he's winning. You know, I mentioned 2022 is like the race that most surprised me in 22 by far was that Oz lost. And I think that has to be extremely instructive on this Biden debate thing. Right? Because it's the most direct, like that debate with Fetterman, what like people are like, that was terrifying. I couldn't believe like that occurred. And then that Fetterman won. And not only did he win, he won by 5 points. Like that has to be the most direct precedent for this Biden debate, which was not nearly as bad as Fetterman's. So anyways.
I would love to get your take on the Project 2025 kerfuffle. I think the thing I'll just start with, and I wasn't going to like tweet this or put this in writing anywhere, but just sort of, I've been warning my like smart MAGA friends about Project 2025 arrogance for a long time. There are a lot of people who have been way too explicit about Trump clearly not having an agenda outside of a couple different issue areas. And then therefore we, the smart people, are going to attach ourselves and our institutions to staff Trump and to get the agenda done and do all these different things. Like Vivek does this. There's this like really bad practice. And I think the Project 2025 thing, and then Kevin Roberts making reference to a second American Revolution, which could be violent, was peak just sort of like a huge misunderstanding of like where the electorate is and where even Trump knows where he is. I think Trump has a pretty accurate understanding of where the electorate is today. And the whole Project 25 kerfuffle is just a really great example of where like the dividing point between those factions are. What do you think?
Okay. So obviously, like I represent TAC here, and then I also have my opinions as like a human being, and then there's probably a range of opinions within my own magazine, with the caveat that I believe we have some sort of affiliation with like a observing member or something. There's a vast constellation of center-right organizations that signed on to this. This was not passing the buck, but this is something that my predecessor signed on to. So I believe we have affiliation, and then additionally we have run op-eds from their people, and I know some of the people. My understanding is that how I would sum, so with those caveats, not to gum up the works of legalese, I will answer your question overtly. My understanding of the Project 2025 thing is probably threefold. Number one, it is poorly reported and poorly understood that heritage was very important in writing Trump administration policy in 2016 or 2017. Like, I think like they were a repository of policy position papers back then. I mean, it is, in my opinion, unfortunately, the story of why Trump pursued an asinine healthcare plan, and his signature economic policy was a tax cut, right? Because like the sort of neoconservative or zombie Reagan, whatever you want to call it, these are sort of cliches at this point, but like that was the paper that was available in a basement somewhere for a Republican president to do when Trump won his shock victory in 2016, right? So like there was precedent for this to happen before. Number two, and this is probably what I'm probably most plugged in on, there was long a frustration of Trump's personnel not agreeing with anything that the president said and not understanding, I would say, the three cardinal issues of Trump's appeal, which are immigration, foreign policy, and trade, and the administration not pursuing that in any real way. I think they did do it on trade. Immigration didn't so much happen, right? I mean, I think they did it with border enforcement was way up, but famously didn't get the wall, right? And foreign policy, I mean, I probably more associated with reporting on that than anything, but like, you know, Bolton was the national security advisor, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So there was a desire for that to be different. And I think you saw the beginnings of it being different in 2020. It aired, but like, you know, when there was the change at the personnel management office, and I think if Trump had won re-election, you would have seen a different administration on foreign policy. And then I think there is this element which is quite interesting, and I don't fully have my head around, that I would say, so I'm just very generationally focused, and some people liked it and other people don't. But it strikes me as that Gen Z conservatives, Zoomer conservatives, i.e. the staffers who will work for $60,000 a year, or staff Hill offices, or, you know, be dragoons in a Republican administration, are very socially conservative in a way that is perhaps distinct from people 10 to 15 years older, right? And we talk about that. I'm happy to. But their Project 2025, in terms of a Democratic talking point, is not really I mean, last weekend, so this will be 10 days from the air of this, like Biden spoke in Pennsylvania, and the warm-up guy was all about Project 2025. Like, just like it is totally going to be a big story. And we could talk about how the Democrats are messaging it, and we could talk about how the Republicans might react to it. I would observe that this is a tried and true practice on demonizing Republicans, which is that there is a secret power behind the throne, and that there is a secret mastermind, right? And so,
which I'll note actually matters with Trump, because in Trump's case, Trump is more popular and more likable than your average Republican. So you have to, if you're a Democratic operative, you need to make as clear as possible, if you can, that there's less of a gap between Trump and the establishment that people don't like as possible.
Right. So I guess if acting White House Chief of Staff Hunter Biden calls me up and offers to pay me a bunch of Ukrainian and Chinese money to advise the president because his party is abandoning him, if I were advising him, you would say, like, look, man, your father's favorables are worse than Trump's. People like Trump more than Biden. They think he's funny, and he's durable, and they think your father can't think so good. So you can't make it a personality matchup, right? And so you need an argument, and you know that the social stuff is the most potent stuff for you. Not even close, right? I mean, there's like the clear advantage that Democrats have. And you know, voters know that Trump doesn't really care about this stuff. I mean, it's just like, that's like nobody, even like his, you know, very socially conservative diehards, like argue that he is a devout Christian or a devout pro-lifer. They know they are in coalition with somebody. And you can say like, oh, maybe he's become more sentimental or spiritual and, you know, with age. And I think there's actually evidence for all of that thing. But like, this is clearly like, he doesn't want to be president to do national abortion bans. That's not, yeah, come on. And so I think you need a bogeyman. They put the biggest right-wing bogeyman in jail, Steve Bannon. And so they need a new one. And it will be Project 2025 if they do not personify it somehow. So It's very clever. And then additionally, I don't think the demonization is on the lines of, it's not like, ooh, Project 2025, they're going to put tariffs. Tariffs are coming to a theater near you, folks. And like, you know, the native stuff is good for like, you know, the red meat, you know, but they're not really saying that on the trail either. Trump might make Germany spend at 2.5% GDP, folks. It's crazy. We might not get ripped off by Berlin anymore. No, they're not saying that. And they're not even saying, which is very telling, because I think it will be a drastic thing if they actually try to do this, if there's a Republican administration. They're not even focusing on the deportation stuff, right? Like, I mean, I think 10
very
years
noticeable, because once again, to your point, people doubt that, and I think not just doubt, it's not true. President Trump like wakes up in his self-narrative and it's like, I'm going to do a national abortion ban. What Trump actually wants to do is the deportation in some form. Like that's an actual area where the Democratic scary case is most in line with like actual probabilities.
They're not running on it, right? So like, I mean, I think 10 years ago they run on it. He's like, this is Gestapo. They target advertisements in Hispanic communities. They go all about it. I hear almost nothing on it. Putting aside whether or not it's the right call, putting aside whether or not you think Trump will actually do it, right? It's in his platform that was just released, or the draft platform, which I think is being approved today. They're running on it. And the Dems are not running against it because there has been a change in immigration views in this country and because the border is a clear liability for Biden. What are they running on? Abortion, IVF, gay marriage, maybe cannabis. I don't think they're running on trans. They'll rope it into LGBTQ, I think. They're running on the social stuff. So you have a situation in which the libertine center-right president, his greatest electoral liability is probably, objectively speaking, the social conservative elements of Project 2025, which he has now denounced. It's quite interesting.
Yeah, and I think I'm in Austin, and most of my friends are just apolitical. And what's been really interesting is the Project 2020. A lot of these people are sort of like the Biden worst case people, especially like the 30-something men.
What does that mean?
In worst case from the Biden administration's perspective. So this is even in like the Austin suburbs. They're like, look, Trump's funny. They think, to your point, they think Trump is funny. The parts of Trump that they like least have just been forgotten. So they just think they don't remember like 2018, 2019 Trump cringy stuff, which like really like lowered us. They just remember him as funny. And Joe Biden was built in a lab to be not the person who they want to affirmatively vote for. The Project 2025 stuff, unprompted by me, has been the first actual thing that's broken through to them. As in, hey, like, what's up with this? Hey, I'm hearing about this thing. And that's not to say that it's going to be ultimate. I'm not like making a claim that it's like ultimately like hyper decisive, but I just think it's like I think you set that up well, and that like, there's just something here, because I think this exposes Trump's biggest vulnerability. If you're in this category of swing state voter, you're voting because you want it to be January 2020 again. The economy's good. We've moved past Russiagate. Trump was excited. Like there was something going on there.
Well, we were in really good shape. Yeah.
What then happens with the Dobbs decision is that's a clear illustration of, along with Trump being funny and Trumpy, you get all this socially conservative stuff, which you didn't vote for and you didn't think Trump supported in the first place. And the Project 2025 reality is it's just like, and this is why I'm like, not just doing this. I obviously disagree with most of Project 2025, but the part where I'm just like flabbergasted is like, why would you put this on paper? Why would you take like Trump's biggest vulnerability and then try to just sort of like wink, wink, nudge, nudge, this is the deal here? Because like, obviously, you know, there's the whole like, look, like we said specifically, if you look through statements, that this wasn't for Trump, this was for come on, like we all know what was going on there. So I just don't understand at a strategic level why this was, and I know Heritage has the long history of like the project for of like the mandate for leadership in the 1980s, but like you didn't have to make it 900 pages. I don't understand what was happening here.
why it was denounced or why it was ever.
No. Why? I think this is the sort of Trump landslide. If Trump loses, I think it's going to, again, this is another example. I'm not going to say who this is, obviously, but this is a high placed friend of mine. A few months ago, he texted me saying, man, I can't believe we're going to have a MAGA restoration in this country. I think that evaluation is a total misreading of an America that's going to reelect Trump if Trump wins again. And I think that's the sort of mentality that leads you to be way too arrogant and flashy with Project 2025, which put this into a point of electoral vulnerability.
Okay. So, all right. A lot is going on here for myself. So as somebody who wants to see some of this stuff done, this is difficult for me because I am not as bullish on it happening. I'm not bullish on, I believe Biden is favored in this election. I believe the Democrats are favored. So I believe Biden will stay, and then accordingly he is favored. That's my view. Happy to update it if I think events change. That's my view. I am very sympathetic to the idea that if there is a second center-right administration in this country that runs on Trump's ideas or Trump himself or some combination, it has got to have policy or this is a joke. And so I think I'm going to push back a little bit, like it needed to have this. And I don't know how else you can do a lot of this stuff. People have jobs, like you got to pay some people to do this. You got to coordinate. I think a lot of it was important work. So I guess you could have made it a lot more secret. And maybe that's a good counterfactual. Essentially, if you remember, this is like OG stuff. So you mentioned American Affairs. So who's American Affairs run by? Julius Krein. If Julius Krein and Michael Anton were the head of what? Journal for the American Greatness, which is like this sort of secret blog, that occurred in 2016, which I think is now destroyed or defunct or unfindable. Maybe it's findable, but that's like the closest thing they had to a policy document, or even just a philosophical statement of what we're even doing here that existed in 2016. And the administration would have been a lot better if they had just done that stuff and had staffed at that level. I know Anton was in the administration, but more of that, right? So that's my view. So I think that needed to happen. I really do think there is a point of departure, and I really am not trying to castigate it, because I think we can talk about the social conservative element of Republican politics and why it's so durable and why it's so important and why it's so powerful. I think it's an actually interesting sociological conversation. But if we were just calling balls and strikes here, I think the foreign policy, trade, and immigration stuff are net electoral advantages for Trump, and the social conservative stuff in the year of our Lord 2024 are clear albatross liabilities. And that is what they are running on, the Dems. And so it would be an interesting question of whether or not they should have had a lot of this stuff in there. I don't know the exact, I think some of the stuff has been unfairly characterized. But clearly there is jujitsu and a tango going on with the exact language and a lot of this stuff. And it's interesting. And, I had given this cut that the overturn of Roe v. Wade is actually one of the few examples of center-right competence in the last 40 years, right?
100%. It's a very step-based 40-year project. It got the smartest parts of the conservative coalition engaged, the law school grads. No, 100%.
Yeah. And I've said this and I've gotten screamed at.
How is that possible? That's so obviously true.
I've been screamed at by the right. Okay. You had an era of left-wing wizards on the Supreme Court that usurped Article 1 congressional power, took a lot of issues out of the hands of voters. The abortion issue became more political since Roe v. Wade, not less, right? So mission not accomplished. And the right, over a series of decades, built a cadre and actually got this done, and then actually returned it to the states, which is what they said they wanted to do. And that was achieved. And then Trump, who is called not a conservative and not a social conservative, actually seems to kind of believe in this stuff. If you listen to his speech, like, look, from New Yorkers going to do what they're going to do. Spend a lot of time in Iowa and Nebraska. They like Trump. They can do what they want to do. What's the problem, folks?
I think he really does believe.
I think he believes that. Yeah. I believe it too, for the record. And that is just not where a lot of people are. Mm-hmm. There are a lot of people when you pitch that, both on the left and right, who just, it's 2024. It is a smartphone era. It is an all or nothing issue. I think it's an all or nothing issue for Democrats. They want to recodify Roe and may stop at nothing to do it. And I don't know if Trump's perspective is really where the party is. I mean, I would submit that maybe the median Republican voter is. Yeah. But certainly not
the institutional coalitional parts of the party.
Not at all. And I would have expected, I mean, and then again, like in 2022, when Dobbs happened, I was like, look, this is, how are they going to run on this? Like, how are the Democrats going to run on this? Like, Arizona is not going to do 3-week abortion bans, right? Like, how are they going to run on that in Arizona? Like, Pennsylvania is not going to do it. Virginia, we talked about Virginia. Youngkin couldn't get a 15-week ban done in Virginia, right? Like, this is a 15-week ban is not like, I think 15-week bans were like the absolute, like, it's like a little bit earlier than what would have been allowed under Roe, right? I think first trimester is off the table. Second trimester is like subject to this ridiculous litmus test thing. So I think 15-week bans are hard, but I think 20-week bans were doable under Roe. I could be mistaken. It's not an area of core expertise, and he couldn't get it done. And so I was like, look, this is just not going to be a big thing. And then if you live in South Dakota, like, sorry, it's a pro-life state. Mm-hmm. And look, I understand, like, if you were an extreme pro-choice person, that means that, the rights of a poor person in Pierre, South Dakota, are going to be infringed upon. But like, I don't know, like, it's not like people were, this is often compared to like abortion. Sorry, it's also compared to slavery by hardliners on the issue. It's not like we had serious proposals to ban movement, right? Like, I've not seen almost anywhere people being like, oh, people
There's been a couple. I think there were a couple, and these were shot down pretty quickly. There were a couple attempts before the backlash. I think, and this is what 2022 shut. I think the 2022 midterms shut down the movement bans.
Well, I think they're patently unconstitutional, but that, I'm not a lawyer. I mean, like, it doesn't seem like banning assembly. Like, I don't know. I'm not. It just doesn't strike me as on offer. But fair enough. So it doesn't seem like it's going away. And if it's not going away, then I submit the Republicans are underestimating the degree to which they're running to an electoral pillbox, right? Where they're going to get mowed down. Or at least in the short term. And I've had conversations with people who are higher conviction on this stuff, and they are comfortable with that trade-off. And obviously, and then I would submit, though, the irony of this all, to make it completely recursive, is that for the people who have wrapped themselves in the garb and the armor of Trump as national savior, and who think he was going to win Virginia, in New York, in New Jersey, and he's going to do these policies, the people that most reject Trump are some of these social conservatives, right? I mean, like the Southern Baptist Conventions, who their guest of honor was Mike Pence, Mike Pence is clearly presenting himself. I'm not a believer, but he is clearly presenting himself as the shadow opponent of Trumpism, and he is saying, "I'm going to give you the iron position on these issues, and then I'm also going to give you Reaganism, and I'm going to give you neoconservatism." That's his pitch, and that's the guest of honor at these places, not Trump. And it would be really ironic, and I sense its chances are higher than people think, if that is the beach that Trump's political career dies on. Not convinced. I mean, I obviously Trump has a very good shot at this thing. And my argument is not that Trump will lose, but my argument is that, the hubris, the confidence, the surety of narrative is so redolent to where the Democrats were in the summer of 2016 that it is spooky.
I think that's an excellent place to leave it. What we'll do is you and I need to do a part 2 after the election, because something we didn't get into for time reasons. I'm fascinated by how strong your balance of domestic politics to international affairs is. Because this is a huge, this is a huge cohort problem. Like, there are a few people, like, my day job is mostly foreign policy related, but there are a few people I'd less rather talk to about American politics than people who like study and focus on foreign policy, left and right. Like, this isn't an ideological thing. It's just like, there's the nature of the job and the focus area means that you're just so separated from the day-to-day focus you really need that you can't do it. And then you basically, if you're at all interested, have to then resort to like headline citing. So yes, I'll get your like Nick Kristof or like Thomas Friedman take if you're on the center left, but like I would expect a little deeper than that. But I'd love to do with you after the election, not only a revisiting of our conversation here, but actually just like your full spectrum articulation of where the Republican Party is. 'Cause something I think you do very effectively is you're able to separate the clear reality that you have your finger on the scale pointing the Republican Party to go in a different direction, but you're aware of the gaps between that desire and the actual reality. So that'd be really fun post-November election. So Curt, thanks for joining me on The Realignment.
Of course. Thank you. Appreciate it.